Welcome to Ed's Not Dead. I'm Robbie Dodd. I'm joined by my co-host, Mr. C.H. Siddons. Casey.
Hey, it's good to be back.
Welcome back with your fuzzy microphone.
Fuzzy microphone.
All right. It's good to see you. And of course, Mr. Peter Crable. Hey, Mr. Crabes.
Hey.
All right. It is terrific to be back. We have a wonderful show this evening. It's been, how long since we've been together? 2 weeks?
Not too long. Not too
Yeah.
long.
Yeah, we're doing okay.
The typical fortnight, if you will.
You can find us at Ed's Not Dead PC on Twitter. And of course, check out the website, edsnotdead.com. And as always, Ed's Not Dead is brought to you by Ed's Not Dead Media, a podcast media company that curates, I did not write that copy, high quality audio stories across a variety of genres. And folks, don't be asleep at the wheel. You have to check out Pandemic Pass.
Yes.
Mr. Siddons.
Let me tell you.
New spinoff pod that's getting a lot of love out there in the podcast universe, isn't it, Mr. Siddons?
Let me tell you, I'm pleasantly surprised by the feedback, but also you guys are going to be surprised with some special guests coming up.
Ooh.
That we don't know about?
Yeah, correct.
Is there a shelf life to Pandemic Pass, or is it going to be on? Have you thought that out, or are you
Great
just going to keep going with it?
No, there's two more episodes left, and then we're done. The last episode will be a bombshell. It's going to be really good.
There's been some heavy hitters thus far. So
the title of the last episode, I'll give you a little teaser. The title is it's The Work.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Is it going to be up there with Oprah's interview of Meghan and Harry?
It's going to be up there in terms of listens and excitement on the Twitter sphere, I think.
All right. So our dear listeners, don't miss Pandemic Pass. If I'm not incorrect, a new episode every Thursday morning, right?
That's right. Rick Wormley's interview came out this morning, and the second part of the grading conversation comes out with Joe Feldman tomorrow morning.
Okay. All right. So check it out. Pandemic Pass. All right. It's that time of the show where people tell us how great we are or nothing at all. Mr. Siddons, what do you have for show feedback?
I'm just going to showcase one piece of feedback this time. I don't want to go through all of it. But one of the YouTubes that posted from Pandemic Pass that we had with Phyllis Fagel, friend of the pod,
Phyllis Fagel,
who came on Pandemic Pass. She was great. We had a listener, Rose Morris, who said, this video, the podcast, is so smart. I've been trying to find an insightful YouTube video that really educates the topics in this video. Your video really is like the videos from Dr. Ethan, who I don't know.
Who is Dr. Ethan?
I don't know. I need to find out now.
Okay. All right.
Very super smart guy.
He is an insightful health enthusiast in the UK, and he talks about health symptoms. So, thank you, Rose. Appreciate your feedback.
Thanks, Rose. So is Rose an educator? Do you know anything about Rose?
I don't know much about her. I need to find out.
Well, thanks for sending us feedback, Rose. All right. On the show tonight, we have Dan Reed, a local journalist that we're incredibly excited to have on Ed's Not Dead. He has a blog called Just Up the Pike. Mr. Siddons, you booked Mr. Reed. I know you're stoked about having Dan on the show.
He is a local columnist for the DC metro area, but I think he talks about and tweets about and investigates and writes about topics that really have resonance and importance across the nation in terms of schools and housing policy.
I've read some of his education stuff, but he's written on a wide variety of current events as a journalist.
Yep.
He's very good. All right, fellas. Mr. Crabe sent me a very interesting piece in his go-to highbrow educational online content, Education Next.
Ugh.
How many pieces have we done from Education Next?
Too many.
By Joshua Dunn, titled "What Teachers Spy in Homes Over Zoom Winds Up in Court. Visible Guns, Trump Banners Get Students in Trouble." When you start to read this, you are welcomed by a picture of Representative Lauren Boebert and her Zoom background, which includes various semi-automatic machine guns.
She's a gem.
So anyway, the gist of this story, Mr. Krabs, is that over the last year since the pandemic and kids being virtual, there have been situations where guns in particular have been in kids' backgrounds in various ways. For example, in October 2020, a 12-year-old middle school student was participating in his remote learning class. A teacher captured a screenshot of the moment, revealing a gun behind his bed. And then it was later discovered to be a pellet gun, and there were no charges or no reports filed. Similarly, there was a big case over the last year in Louisiana where a 9-year-old was suspended for 6 days by Jefferson Parish. The fourth grader was participating in a digital class when there was a BB gun on the floor, and the barrel was visible. The school system appeared to go to pretty great lengths to discipline this student, did not allow him to appeal his suspension, and the family sued in federal court claiming a civil rights violation. And the child's attorney asserts that the school did not meet the requirements for due process for the student. So I'm curious, Casey, you've done some teaching this year. Hopefully you haven't run into this. I don't think you have. I'm not sure you would have brought it to the pod, would you have?
No, I don't want to get up on anybody's list. You know what I mean? Most of my kids have their screens off, so it's not a big deal.
Okay. All right. Although you do implore them to turn them on, right?
I do. And a quarter of them on any given day will turn them on.
So suspending kids for 5 days, 10 days, a recommendation for expulsion for a gun, a real gun or a pellet gun in the background. What's your take? Do you think school systems are overreaching with discipline on issues like these? Or do you think they have an obligation, legal or otherwise, to hold students accountable for their behavior in their homes?
I think the guns for me is a clear yes or no. It's like guns certainly pose a threat to other kids, especially if you've been a victim of gun violence or you just watch the news for the school shootings that happen. I mean, having a gun in your background is sending a very clear signal of your beliefs and what you espouse as a person. The Trump banner is a little tricky. I don't know. But
hold on. Guns are, the legal ownership of guns is a constitutional right.
Yeah. But I guess the tricky part is, would you allow them in your school? Would you allow a kid to bring a gun to school?
Guns are not allowed in school.
Okay. So would you allow a kid to walk around the school with a T-shirt that has guns on it? I actually don't know the answer to this question.
Are you asking me, or you're going to answer yourself?
I'm actually asking as administrators, is that something that you would, kid comes in, there's guns all over their shirt, or they have, an NRA hat on, or I don't know, like what do you, are you?
An NRA hat, I wouldn't, obviously you couldn't do anything about. I wouldn't address that. That's, you can wear an NRA t-shirt, I think. I guess intent and, intent is a big part of this in my mind. And then also, I mean, not every one of these situations is the same. The kid who has a BB gun on the floor and the barrel is captured on the screen, to me, is let's do a welfare check. Let's make sure the kids are okay. It's not I'm going to suspend you for 5 or 10 days. I mean,
right.
Lots of kids have BB guns, and just that one was caught accidentally on screen doesn't sound like a disciplinary issue to me. I don't know. What do you think, Mr. Krabs?
Yeah, I mean, so I think there's these two particular cases and the nuances of these cases, which are, to me, a little bit more straightforward. But once you start to extrapolate it out, it gets a little bit more tricky. And I'm pretty torn between, I think, like my heart and my head here, in the sense that I feel pretty strongly that guns don't have much of any place in our society, especially more densely populated areas. You're not using them for hunting, stuff like that. You don't need a handgun to go hunting. So I feel, that's a personal opinion or belief of mine. However, in these particular cases, these kids were not using them in a threatening manner. They were just happened to be seen. And the fact that you have I assume you have the recordings of these Zoom or whatever online sessions. To your point, Robbie, intent I think is hugely important. Where you were able to see, oh well, yes, there was a corner of a gun, a BB gun. I think the school did the right thing to do a wellness check on the child. They found out that it was not a real gun. Yet they decided to suspend him for 10 days anyway, which was pretty perplexing to me.
Totally perplexing.
Right. And it goes back to, at the end of the article, they talk about a zero tolerance policy. And so I think they must have some sort of zero tolerance policy where they're like, well, there was a gun, so I guess we have to do 10 days. But where I think it gets really tricky is just take, Lauren Boebert's picture, for example.
Well, she would get a 10-day suspension with a recommendation for expulsion.
But she's got 6 or 7 guns in her home.
Yep.
As a background.
Yep.
Let's theoretically say that she has not made an explicit threat against anyone in particular. And again, this we'll call this a student. So they're there, but they're not in terms of like suppression of speech and what the Supreme Court has said. I think it could cause a stir, but if they're not used in a threatening manner, how do you differentiate between their presence and purported future intent versus their current intent as you see it now?
I'm with you, and I would go a step further. If most likely in the case of students in elementary or middle school, the gun ownership is not the kids.
Right.
So if they just so happen to be in a room where a parent has a 22 mounted on the wall, which could happen. I mean, there's lots of houses across the country with shotguns on over the mantle. And what to me, there's no intent there. And the kid is not responsible. The parent to a degree is responsible. Now, if a student pulls out a Glock on a Zoom call and starts to wave it around in a classroom or waves it at the camera, well, that's completely different.
Mm-hmm.
What if the gun is in the background and there's no explicit reference to it? However, 2 weeks later, a student makes a threatening remark to another student about shooting them. The other students then at that point know that they have a firearm in the house. They may have no other details, real, unreal BB gun, loaded, not loaded. Does that change the calculus at all retroactively? Or does that change the calculus in terms of the initial step where, yes, there was no intent now, but we are going to take disciplinary action now to prevent future potential issues?
When tell me again, because I missed the one piece. When the kid threatens the other kid, do they threaten to shoot them or do they just threaten them?
They would let's just say they threaten to shoot them. Let's go to the most extreme.
And
there's no gun present during the threatening session. It's just like you and I, you were looking at each other now, but the other student knows that there is a firearm in the home.
I think you go on the merit of that there was a threat to shoot another student and you leave it at that. Now, obviously the way you handle it in real time with the knowledge that there's potentially a firearm in the home, that certainly changes how you respond.
Sure.
I mean, the police are there, you're doing a gun check immediately. In my mind.
Now, the other question I have for the both of
you.
you.
Crable's just throwing leadership disciplinary scenarios at us. Go ahead.
No, but the other question I have is the broader question that this brings up is students are in their homes.
Yeah.
And by and large, schools really have no right, nor do they, I think they really should have any right, per se, to intervene and make decisions about for and about individual families.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's almost like, is there any situation where there could be something present in the home that would merit disciplinary action, or is this just in general a big no-no and off limits for schools that, kids are in their homes and you may see some stuff and somebody may walk by in the background without a shirt on, your cousin or whatever, but schools really don't have much of a disciplinary angle to take.
I guess unless, let's say, a student is sitting on a Zoom call and they have a quarter pound of marijuana in front of them on the desk, the teacher could call the police, right? The police could go to the home. The student could be arrested, and I would then say, is that a suspendable or expellable offense?
Okay, the police go to the home and they don't find any marijuana there.
Yeah.
Then what?
Somebody
it's interesting. It's interesting.
Somebody ran out the back door really quick.
Yeah, I'm just saying. Then what recourse does the school have?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't heard one of these situations, at least in this article in Education Next. I haven't heard none of the ones they cited. Did I think that there was cause for disciplinary action? And I have to say, when you read these are the ones that are cringy to me, because they're the classic school overreach disciplinary articles that you read all the time that always stun me. Let's be honest.
I think one area that I find a little tricky after the insurrection is if you're now, and Trump is not president anymore, and you're still posting a Trump flag, it represents something different than, say, arguably it represents something different than if you had it up in 2015, 2016.
It's free.
I think
this one's clear cut to me.
Clear cut to me too. Schools have absolutely no intervention.
I know. I understand that. I guess I'm just saying in terms of the message it's sending to students in the classroom, especially if we're in a diverse classroom of students of color who are under attack more and more. The rise in Asian racist attacks against Asian folks has been on an exponential rise. The attack on Jewish people is on the rise. Attack on all different minoritized populations. I think it sends a message about maybe folks' intentions, folks' opinions that could be detrimental to other kids.
Yeah,
whether or not there's legal boundaries on it, I understand that.
Well, it can be offensive, but people can offend, and I don't think you can do anything about that speech.
Well, what if a kid had a Nazi flag in the background?
Not a Nazi symbol is 100% associated with as a hate symbol. It is. But
in the United States, you can fly a Nazi flag. You can fly a Confederate flag.
But for schools, it is speech that causes a disruption.
Then, yep.
It has to be a significant disruption.
Okay.
Right.
Yep.
Or it has to violate the rights of others. Is lewd or is pro-drug. So those are the guidelines. Now, yes, obviously within them, there's this. I think this is lewd. You don't think this is lewd. So on.
Sure.
And so, but that has been, the black armband case from the 60s or whatever.
Tinker versus Des Moines.
There you go. Look at you.
Look at me.
Took a school law course.
Woo.
Yeah. I mean, and that's, and let's be honest, any of those situations that even happen now on social media with the use of a swastika or blackface or any of those kinds of things, that if they cause a disruption in school, then schools can act with discipline.
Yeah.
I mean, the unfortunate thing about the Trump flag or shirt or whatever is that, the country did elect him as president.
Sure.
I mean, not that has any bearing on it, but I just,
it makes it a lot trickier than maybe if it were just, something in the.
I mean, maybe at some point someday in the future, that name Trump will be associated plain and simple with hate.
Yeah. I mean, in Germany, like the flag, the Nazi flag is banned, for example. It's been banned since World War II.
Yeah.
And that's what I was going to say. There seems to be for all of these things, blackface, for example, like a point at which the public consciousness it reaches a tipping point that says, yes, this is now this is more or less universally offensive, regarded as offensive.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we're just getting down to pulling Confederate general monuments down. I mean, 150,
a little late.
150 years later.
Right.
All right. This is fascinating. Thanks for another incredibly stimulating education next piece, Mr. Crable.
Was this written by Chester Finn?
And this was a good one because this is a tough one.
Yeah, and I like the angles on this, the free speech and
private property,
the reach of schools into homes. It's such a unique situation.
Yeah, and I'm not a huge fan of schools overreaching. I that's always one of my concerns. All right, folks, don't go away. When we come back, we are incredibly excited to have Dan Reed, the author of the blog Up the Pike, on Ed's Not Dead. Right, fellas?
You got it, Robbie.
I had a moment. Sorry. Yeah, don't go away. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back to Ed's Not Dead, fellas. We are incredibly excited to have local longtime DC journalist Dan Reed, who runs a blog called Just Up the Pike on Ed's Not Dead. You can find Just Up the Pike at justupthepike.com. Dan, welcome to Ed's Not Dead. We're psyched to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me.
All right, let's jump in. Mr. Siddons.
So Dan, in 2019, we interviewed the author of Color of Law, Richard Rothstein, about the impact of housing policy and public schools. We were hoping to have you listen in on one of the more noteworthy things that he shared in our discussion about just housing policy and education policy. And we want to hear your reaction and have this be the spur of our conversation. So let's take a listen to what he had to say.
So we need to address the underlying cause, which is neighborhood segregation. Housing policy is education policy. Mm-hmm. We cannot solve these problems of schools so long as we maintain segregated neighborhoods.
So based on that conversation, what is your reaction to Rothstein's comments about housing policy equaling education policy? And what kind of things has your reporting shown of government actions that impact this issue?
Well, totally. I totally agree. The root of American, school policy in the past, however many decades has been that school assignments are based on the neighborhood you live in. And the neighborhoods that we live in are set in place by land use and zoning laws, which date in many cases to the early 20th century. And at the time, the emphasis was still on creating racially and socioeconomically segregated neighborhoods. So even though, there were laws made 70 or 80 years ago, exclusionary zoning, redlining, racial covenants, even though many of these things are no longer in effect today, they still have locked in a segregated pattern in our neighborhoods, which in turn results in schools that are stratified by race and class. The challenge is, I think, when people fall back on that as a reason to not do anything else, like, well, our neighborhoods are segregated, so we just have to accept the fact that our schools are going to look the way that they do.
Sure.
And I think that relationship isn't quite as simple as it seems.
So my follow-up question, and maybe I'm just naive, but it seems to have gotten worse, the problem of segregation of schools. And maybe, as I said, maybe it's just I'm waking up to the fact that it is what it is. So I guess one question is, has it become more pronounced in the last, 10 years or so? And if so, is there any particular reason for that?
Longer than that, actually. Nationally, my understanding is that schools in the U.S. were at their peak of integration in the late 1980s. A couple of things happened. One is that we've seen growing inequality, which I think has resulted in more racial and class stratification. One is that, particularly in the South, a lot of school districts that had oversight from the federal government to maintain integration no longer have that. So they are allowed to do whatever they want, basically, anymore. And particularly in suburban districts, the suburbanization of poverty, I think, has created a situation in which school districts that were, by default, kind of integrated because there just wasn't that much diversity to integrate in the first place are becoming segregated because there's just a more diverse array of people in that community, and those patterns of where wealth goes in a community, in a region, have only become more entrenched.
Dan, in your reporting, and I'm sure you've looked back historically on this, when you consider de jure segregation and de facto segregation, do you see, you mentioned the late 1980s, do you see from that point forward government doing less or little or none at all to address the issue, local school systems or municipalities? Is there a parallel there between, okay, we got to this point by the late 80s, we don't need to do anything more, and now since then we've seen this resegregation?
I think part of it is complacency, and I think part of it is, I think culturally we just haven't caught up to the fact that our suburbs are more diverse.
Right.
And focusing on suburbs because that is where most Americans live and where most of the diversity is occurring in our country.
Mm-hmm.
And it is a big cultural shift to go from we are an affluent, homogenous bedroom community to a place that is grappling with increased poverty, people from very different walks of life, very different parts of the world, having to deal with the speakers of other languages than English, having to deal with different cultural values. Going back to the 1990s, there was a report from, I want to say, it's a professor at Harvard, Myron Orfield, who said that Montgomery County's progressive reputation has become an impediment to doing anything about segregation because people assume that it's figured out, and that's not unique to Montgomery County. I think a lot of places assume they have it figured out,
sure,
and just sort of work around the edges of the problem, and in part because there's a lot of I think political inertia to keep things the same. If you are in a well-regarded school district, people generally like it. It has a good reputation. It supports, high home values and a good reputation. And there obviously is a fear of rocking the boat and doing anything that might change the perception.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Rothstein in our interview talked about that, some of the changes and some of the policy suggestions that he shared. They would certainly go, begin the process of solving this, really what's become a crisis. But a lot of it is maybe not palatable for a large swath of our politicians who are supposed to be leading this in these areas. And I wanted to play a second clip for you that. In the same interview, we asked Rothstein, what should we be doing to combat the segregation in housing and schools? And let's play that clip for you now.
I don't think I liked his response. I remember this.
The important thing to keep in mind is that we don't have the political will yet to implement any of these policies. So policymakers know what we should do. It's no secret. What we need is a new civil rights movement that's going to demand that we do it.
So, what are your thoughts on just the kind of proposals that have been shared in the past and what things that you've reported on in terms of solving this housing segregation crisis across the country?
I think in the same way that housing policy is school policy, like the solution to housing segregation or school segregation usually involves the other.
Sure.
Right? It's about how we fund our different school systems and divisions within a school system and making sure that's equitable. I think it's about offering more choice programs. Lots of places have experimented with that, doing magnets, doing lottery programs, and they're certainly not a panacea, but they definitely, I think, help bring attention to schools that might otherwise not receive funding or attention from families with means, which is relevant because studies show that socioeconomically integrated schools perform better for everyone.
Yes,
integrated school and integrated community works better for everyone. So whatever we can do to create an integrated school, whether it's working on the housing policy or giving people incentives to integrate the school themselves, those are helpful things. we should look at school boundaries. I mean, I think as a general rule, like, you know, if Congress can redraw their congressional boundaries every 10 years, we can do that in the school system.
Yeah.
Obviously, the fear is that people, you know, feel like they are paying for access to a certain public good.
Right.
And that obviously creates challenges. On the land use side, one of the best things that we can do is to remove what's called exclusionary zoning. This goes back to the 1920s and 30s. In the beginning of the 20th century, many cities around the country, including Baltimore here in Maryland, instituted like literally racial zoning, saying this section was for white people, this section was for black people. The Supreme Court in 1916 ruled that this was unconstitutional because there was a case from Kentucky where a white man wanted to sell his house to a black man and his property rights were being violated. That was his argument. 10 years later, the Supreme Court offered an alternative in a decision called Euclid v. Ambler. This was in Ohio. And they basically said, well, you can't zone out black people, but you can zone out types of housing you don't want, such as apartment buildings, which the Supreme Court in 1926 called a parasite on desirable neighborhoods.
Wow.
And so, you know, to this day, you know, communities around the country can directly shape the demographics of their community and by extension the demographics of their school by just not allowing apartments or townhomes or requiring minimum lot sizes, requiring certain standards for the design and construction of the house that pretty much mandate that homes in a neighborhood have to be expensive. And that is, you know, one of the best tools we have had to segregate neighborhoods, and one of the best things that we can do to desegregate neighborhoods is by opening up to different types of housing.
So I have two zoning related questions.
We're getting really wonky.
Oh yeah.
Let's talk about zoning policy, baby.
Well,
no, I love it. I actually really enjoy it.
So Berkeley just prohibited single family home zoning. So I guess the first question is that something that you would advocate for? I know it's kind of a radical step. I shouldn't say that. Some people would see it as a radical step. I shouldn't say it is a radical step, but just because it's so unfamiliar to people. And then two, you know, as we move into a new, you know, presidential administration, what power does the federal government have to dictate zoning to local municipalities? You know, I know, and I can't remember. I wish I'd done a little bit more research before, but you know, where there's certain types of housing, whether it's Section 8 housing or whatever, that some states and or counties and or jurisdictions say, okay, for every development that you build, you have to put in X amount of this income housing. So I just don't know whether that is state by state, jurisdiction by jurisdiction, city by city, town by town. You know, so what can the federal government do? And then how do you feel about restricting or eliminating single family home zoning in specific communities?
Sure. There's a few things going on there. So for starters, you know, communities, there are several cities around the country, Minneapolis, Berkeley, Grand Rapids, Michigan, Sacramento, Austin, Portland, who have all are either looking at or have opened up areas that were zoned exclusively for single family homes for other things. So to be clear, they're not saying you can't build single family homes anymore. What they're saying is you should be allowed to build other types of homes in this neighborhood too, townhomes, triplexes, little apartment buildings, and so forth. And that is, you know, zoning control is strictly at a local level. The federal government does not have a say in that, nor really do states. But what states and the federal government can do is create incentives for certain kind of zoning decisions. States can say, Oregon, and Oregon has done this and California is trying to do this, you have to allow certain things in your zones. They can also say, we're going to tie certain funding to you having certain kinds of zones in your community. That's something in particular the federal government has the power to do.
Sure.
Is it successful?
It hasn't happened yet.
Oh, okay.
But it is something that many of the Democratic primary candidates talked about. It is something that I believe the Biden administration has talked about. Like, can you tie federal funding for certain initiatives in the community to you need to get rid of your exclusionary zoning? I mentioned another thing in there, which is called inclusionary zoning, which is basically the requirement that in a new development, you have to set aside a certain percentage of the units to low or moderate income households. Montgomery County is actually the first place in the country to do this. In the 1970s, they are like the national leader in this. Every new housing development in Montgomery County that has at least 20 units has to set aside 12.5% of them for low-income households, which in general is we're talking like $60,000 a year for a household of one, and then it goes up based on the number of people in your household.
Right.
And it is one of the ways, not the only way, that we are able to put affordable housing in lots of different places. And it's been copied by many other jurisdictions all over the country that have programs similar to this. And what's cool about it is it actually allows us to see what are the impacts of housing policy on school policy. Because Montgomery County has had this for a long time, one of the biggest studies on the relationship between housing and schools was done in Montgomery County, looking at students who lived in affordable housing in two very affluent school catchments and comparing them to students who lived in affordable housing in other areas, and finding that there actually was a substantial difference in performance for those students who lived in more socioeconomically integrated neighborhoods.
Yeah, that was I know that study. It was who was that authored by, Dan? I need to remember that. So it was the kids in subsidized housing in a more affluent area that were in a quote unquote higher performing school that ended up doing better. Correct? Kids. Correct. Yeah. We need to get our hands on that, boys. We should do a segment on that.
Heather Schwartz, and it was done for the RAND Corporation.
Yeah. It was a RAND study.
And the title is literally Housing Policy to School Policy.
Oh.
Wow, so our friend Richard stole that.
We thought Richard was so clever. We're like, that's amazing.
Man.
He just ripped it off.
All right.
Later.
This is the get off the show question, and I haven't completely formulated it. We took a hard turn into zoning, which is not my forte. Let's end with
but Robbie, so like you said, we took a hard turn, but think about the implications of the work that we're trying to highlight, right? We're a podcast about education, but yet people don't inherently think about the changes that need to happen with education and housing policy or zoning. But yet they're so intertwined.
Yes, they are.
Right.
I don't think.
So
yeah,
I think it's important. It's an important conversation.
Yeah, no, it absolutely. And Dan shows how hard it is to tease them apart. They are very interconnected. But I am also curious about. We have a new administration. You talked a little bit about what the federal government can do with housing policy. But what about straight up education policy to address resegregation? Do you see anything on the horizon that the Biden administration might do?
That's a good question. I'm not as familiar with what they're talking about. I mean, one of the best things I think the federal government can do is to start doing oversight of local jurisdictions again, to the extent that that's possible, and holding local jurisdictions to a standard.
I agree.
Sure that they have it, and also providing funds and assistance and grants to create more school integration programs. I hate to bring it back to Montgomery County again, but the consortia, which was Montgomery County's like school choice program started in the 90s, was possible because of a federal grant for school choice programs, right? That was a federal policy that resulted in, my ability to choose the high school I went to.
All right. Well, Dan, it's been great to have you on the show. Folks, you can check out Just Up the Pike at justupthepike.com. Dan, where can...
Hold on. I have a guest quiz.
Oh, Lord. Here we go.
We can't go without a guest quiz. I'm sorry. Are you ready, Dan?
All right, Dan. It'll be relatively painless.
It's painless. Dan, it has been a pleasure having you on the pod. It was great talking with you. But Dan Reed, we want to know, and this was a tough one to come up with. We want to know what you know about reed instruments.
Boy.
A wind instrument with a single or double reed.
Clarinets.
So there's two questions about reed instruments, and then I ran out of space and brain space to actually find a third one. But I have a third one that's related to your Up the Pike blog.
Okay.
You ready? All right. Number one, the oboe is one such reed instrument. But what does an oboe sound like? Finish this description from a famous composer. Quote, "The sounds of the oboe are suitable for expressing simplicity, artless grace, gentle happiness, or the grief of what? A weak soul, B, a sad sack, or C, a lonely sixth grader?
I was in chorus all through middle and high school, so this is lost on me. I'm going to guess A.
A is correct. A weak soul is what they describe the sound of an oboe. I'm sorry for oboists around the world. Number 2, continuing on the oboe theme, which is obviously a pretty funny word. Where does the word oboe come from? A, the German word Ober. B, the French word, I'm going to butcher this, hautbois. Hautbois.
Hautbois?
Hautbois.
Okay.
Or C, the Spanish word obando.
I like that.
Oh, man. I'm going to guess.
Wait, let him finish.
Go ahead, Dan.
Maybe
Which one?
French?
It is French. The French word, hautboi, pronounced hautbois. That translates to high wood or loud wood. And number 3, you're doing great, Dan. Number 3, the word, this is related to your Up the Pike blog, as I was trying to find quiz questions that related to things like pikes. The word turnpike is a combination of 2 words, turn plus pike. In this context, a pike is the name for blank. A medieval pole-mounted weapon. B, an extinct freshwater fish. Or C, a Raytheon-developed guided round fired from a grenade launcher.
Definitely that one.
I'm assuming the first one.
A is correct. A medieval pole-mounted weapon. You got 3 for 3. Nice job,
yeah.
Dan.
Dan is one of only very few guests who's gone 3 for 3.
I think anybody ever has.
That's because he's a journalist.
That's right. That's right. He just knows,
He knows
his stuff.
too much.
He does. All right, Dan. Thank you for enduring that. I tried to get us out of here without the quiz, but
I knew you were going to try to do that.
You did very well. All right, so Just Up the Pike, Dan Reed, his blog. Dan, where can folks find you on Twitter?
At Just Up the Pike.
Okay, at Just Up the Pike. Pretty simple. Do you have anything coming out soon that you want to tell us about?
I'm trying to write more about having a dog, so look out for more dog-related content.
All right. Well, dog-related content. Before we let you go, I do want to say to our listeners that Dan has the most well-behaved dogs in the world's head on his lap for the last 25 minutes. So,
and he is very stubborn. He's a very stubborn boy.
He's been a good boy tonight. Dan Reed, thank you for coming on Ed's Not Dead. We've loved having you on the show. We'll get you back on soon. Take care.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Welcome back to Ed's Not Dead. I'm Robbie Dodd. I'm still joined by my co-host, Mr. Peter Crable and Mr. Casey Siddons. Ed's Not Dead is brought to you by Ed's Not Dead Media, a podcast media company that curates high-quality audio stories across a variety of genres, including Mr. Siddons' extraordinary pod, Pandemic Pass. Don't miss it.
Pandemic Pass.
New episode out now with 2 more biggies coming. All right. That was incredible to have Dan Reed on the show. He was amazing. Good job, Mr. Siddons. He knows an incredible amount about housing, transportation, and education.
Yes, indeed.
Casually pulling Supreme Court cases.
Man.
Yeah. Mr. Siddons, Mr. Crable, I always love it when I can tell that you wished you had just done that extra bit of research. So you could have, because you always ask great questions, but if you'd just done a little more, you could have asked a really incredible question.
Yeah, with actual factual basis behind it.
Yeah, no, that was great. Thanks again to Dan Reed. All right. Yeah. It is time to roll out a new segment that we have never done before. It is going to be a quick hitter, but we think it's going to be great, don't we? It's called Stock Up, Stock Down.
That's right.
And
we
don't have any intro music to it. We are going to go through various topics related to education, and I'm going to moderate it. And Mr. Sids and Mr. Crable are going to give us the stock up or stock down. Are you ready, fellas?
Ready.
Any questions about how this works? I don't think I've ever hosted one of these segments on Ed's Not Dead.
The last segment is never yours.
All right. Stock up, stock down. Here we go. Stock up, stock down. Mr. Crable, Zoom School.
I'm going to go with the big stock down on Zoom
man.
School.
All right. You got to tell us why.
I don't think it's going away. Even in the fall, it's still going to be present. But it's going to be vastly diminished, and I think people are just over it. So I think I'm going to go ahead and say stock down because people are like, I'm done staring at a screen.
Disagree. Stock up.
Oh.
Big stock up. As much as I've despised Zoom teaching, I've had folks text me and share with me, in person, and then I just got a text today about, are we doing a Zoom school once this thing is all over? And obviously there's conversations across the country of creating Zoom K-12 schools, but I think it actually will bump up the practices of things like home and hospital teaching, and I think it'll be a great opportunity for kids who have struggled in the traditional in-school traditional environment, like those who suffer from anxiety or folks who are suffering from trauma, or people that are, folks that get pregnant in high school, people that, need an alternative way of learning. I think it's going to be good for them.
A new version of homeschool.
Yeah.
So we are split on stock up, stock down on Zoom School. All right. Ready. Stock up, stock down. Mr. Siddons on snow days.
Oh man, you're throwing a curveball. That's not on the list. That's not on the list.
Come on, you were Notre Dame on snow days. Give it.
I don't know which one agrees or disagrees.
Just it's your choice.
I would say stock down. Unfortunately, I think snow days, as we have once known them, are a thing of the past. I think even though kids and parents or teachers will still experience snow days, technically, I think there will still be an expectation that teachers do PD or that students do asynchronous work in some capacity, and that's unfortunate.
All right. Very good. You thought quickly on your feet there, Mr. Sims. I threw that in. Do you want to take that one, Mr. Krabs? You want me to move on?
I think it's going to be stock down on snow days next year. As I think I mentioned last episode, school systems are still going to have Zoom licenses, but I think the year after that, in 2 years from now, very few schools are going to have system-wide Zoom licenses, and it's going to be back to snow days as usual.
Or systems will create their own Zoom and think it's better.
No.
All right. Stock up, stock down. Mr. Crable, summer school.
Oh, this is going to be a big fat stock down in summer school.
I'm with you on that one.
Yeah. I certainly understand the need for summer school and the importance of summer school. But I also understand the need for hopefully a little bit more of a return to normal as more and more people get vaccinated, as more and more things open up safely. And that everybody just needs to go outside and run around and play for 3 months. So I'm going to go ahead and do a stock down on summer school.
I'm going opposite. I'm saying stock up.
Oh, let's hear it.
I'm going to be Nostradamus again. I think this is going to be a time period of the next few years where school districts are going to shift to all year schooling and just have more breaks in between. And I've been advocating it for years, but I think this is the time that school districts are going to say. So, and it's not necessarily espousing summer school, but I think it'll just be a more consistent school year of education for kids.
Let's get away from that farming agrarian calendar, right, Mr. Siddons?
Well,
get 2 weeks off in late September.
Well, I got to farm the turnips.
All right. Stock up, stock down on standardized testing. I know Mr. Siddons is going to go full stock up on this one. Mr. Siddons.
Full stock down. I was watching this video recently.
This is your new pet peeve.
I was watching
That's why I put it on there.
this interview recently with, I can't remember who was on it, but they were talking about how, all of a sudden, school districts and companies across the nation suddenly found the will to do things like cancel standardized testing. And look what we found. We were able to give Chromebooks to computers to every kid, and Wi-Fi connection to every kid. And companies like Comcast were able to get free internet to families, and all these things they were suddenly, magically all able to do. I think standardized testing, big stock down, and we need to severely curtail the amount and the breadth of the amount of testing that happens.
All right, Mr. Crable.
As much as I would like to agree, again, my heart says no, my head says yes. I'm going to go ahead and say stock up on standardized testing. They're not going anywhere.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
If you recall, we interviewed Chairman of the Ed and Labor Committee, Bobby Scott.
We did.
Who was very pro.
He was happy about it.
Very pro standardized testing. Wanted to know where kids were, where they might have lost learning, what progress they made over the course of the year. It's an entrenched system with contracts that are not so easy to get out of. And I don't think that school systems really have all that much of a great desire to get out of them. I think teachers in those kind of like administering the test would love to get out of them. But for communities at large, I just don't think it's that big of an issue.
Yep, you're probably right.
All right. Now we are at the speed round portion of stock up, stock down. You can give a very brief justification. All right. Are you ready?
Okay,
we have two more, and then we have the grand finale, stock up, stock down. Here we go. Mr. Siddons, teachers unions.
I say stock up. I think by and large, communities are still pro-teacher and supportive of teachers, and thereby teachers unions as well.
All right, good. Mr. Crable.
I'm going to say a brief stock down, but they'll bounce back.
A correction in the market?
Yeah, they'll bounce back by the time fall rolls back around. It's just a blip on the radar.
Okay, gotcha. All right, stock up, stock down. Mr. Crable, full-time. Will we be full-time in person in the fall?
I'm going to go big stock up. My prediction is over 95% of public school students will be in person in the fall nationwide.
Right. Stock up.
Stock up.
You're all in.
Yep, agreed.
All right. Final stock up, stock down. Are you ready?
We're ready. It's not on the list.
Education Secretary Miguel Cardona's 5-point plan. Stock up, stock down.
Well, yeah, big stock down.
Ooh, big stock down.
No, just a stock down. I would say mealy-mouthed stock down.
You can go a little deeper on this one since it's the finale.
I feel like there's not enough meat to it, and I feel like it's just not. I feel like there's just not enough details to really say that big things are going to be happening. I'm like, meh.
I didn't see. I'm not supposed to be a part of this. Mr. Crable, stock up, stock down.
I would also do a stock down. It's too much of a data collection program.
A national survey.
Sharing
blue ribbon commissions,
sharing best practices. About like in Connecticut, the program they had called Learn Together, Grow Together.
Innovative strategies.
A second volume of the COVID-19 handbook. By the time that comes out, we won't even remember what COVID-19 is anymore.
Yep. A
national survey about schools reopening status. What is? We're past that, man. Schools are open. And then
he needs to listen to Pandemic Pass.
And then finally the financial help. Well, they just signed that into law today. So again, I don't know. I would have and I understand you're new to the job, but I guess I just wish instead of being like, well, let's learn about this, it would have been like, I know about this and this is what we're going to do, and bang, bang, bang.
Yep.
Yeah, that would have been, I think, a little bit more heartening.
Take decisive action.
Yeah, I don't think he went big out of the gate. I think we're going to look back on Secretary Cardona's initial proposal, if that's what you want to call this, and think, it was a lukewarm. You said mealy mouth, Mr. Siddons. That's good. I didn't. Just doesn't have any heft. Doesn't. Yeah. There's money. That's great to help school districts. And there were a lot of buzzwords in it. Oh man,
a lot of buzzwords.
Yeah,
yep.
I mean,
want to help the Google SEO out.
Yeah. So we will hope for better things from Secretary Cardona as he gets his feet underneath him. All right, so that is this episode's version of Stock Up, Stock Down. Good job, fellas.
That was great.
Do you want a little inside baseball on the education department?
Ooh, always.
You have jobs for us?
Yes.
What do you have, Mr. Crable?
A little inside knowledge. So one of the things that is not in there has to do with the morale at the education department and how beaten down and demoralized staffers were. Career-long bureaucrats of the such and the nature.
Yeah.
That when by the time Cardona came in and gave his sort of like welcome speech to everybody, that people were near in tears with joy and happiness.
I had heard the same thing.
Wow.
I had heard the same thing about DOJ that the first morning that people were just basically felt like just the grayest, darkest cloud ever. It had been lifted, and they even just the first day felt differently. So
amazing.
So times have changed. So we're happy for those folks because now they can work in maybe a somewhat normal environment that has some interest in public schools.
And the secretary believes that there's systems.
Yeah. Yep. All right. Mr. Siddons, we are not doing one of your, we did the quiz with Dan Reed, but we are not going to do a Crable Dodd quiz this episode.
No, we are not. I must say, I love the Stock Up, Stock Down. That was good.
Yeah, that was good.
Yeah.
I like that one.
Great segment.
It's better than the Robbie Dodd 80s segment.
I liked the 80s segment too.
I know. I liked it. Well, let's bring it, but Crable didn't like it.
The problem is Robbie won't tell the stories that I want him to tell.
Yeah, I know.
On the air. So there are these weak, anesthetized stories when I know the real stories are way better.
Yeah. Well, when our media company comes up with another podcast and I'm in a different phase of my life, I will share. All right. As always, we are brought to you by Ed's Not Dead Media, a podcast media company that curates high quality audio stories across a variety of genres. Once again, another plug for Casey's Pandemic Pass, new episode out, a couple more big ones coming. Good job, Mr. Sids. We're proud of you for your spinoff podcast.
Thank you.
Yeah. You can find us at Twitter, at Ed's Not Dead PC, and edsnotdead.com is our website, which Mr. Crable is about to experience an overhaul. Not yet. It's going to be under maintenance soon, correct?
Yeah. We're probably should put this at the beginning of the show, but yeah, we're going to change up the look and feel of it a little bit. And Ed's Not Dead will still be a part of the company, but Ed's Not Dead Media is going to kind of take over several different podcasts, Pandemic Pass, Ed's Not Dead, and a couple more that we have in the works. So Ed's Not Dead will look a little bit more like a podcast distribution site as opposed to just our one particular podcast.
That's right.
Watch out, Pod Save America, right?
Yeah, I mean we're basically right on their heels.
Yeah, we are. Thanks to Rose Morris, who sent us some really great feedback. We appreciate you listening, Rose. And, of course, thanks to Dan Reed. He was a great guest talking about the resegregation of schools and housing policy and education policy. Fellas, what do you have in store in your lives in the next couple days? Anything fun?
Robbie, you're going to enjoy this. So we went for a hike last weekend, not too far from where you live. And we were walking by a little pond, and this woman with the kids, and this woman stopped and said, "Hey, just so you know, there's usually tons of frogs in that pond."
Ooh, I'm a frog.
You're a frogger. Yeah, I know you are. So she's like, "I think it's just a little bit chilly for them." She's like, "Come back in a week or two, and it should be teeming with frogs." So I bought a bunch of nets. So me and the kids and some of their buddies, we're going to go this weekend and try and catch some frogs and lick them and see what happens.
Get some warts over the weekend.
There you go.
The warts typically come from toads, but that's great. And you know what? You should bring a jar or a bucket, and maybe you'll find some eggs that you can bring home. And
okay,
some gelatinous egg balls from frogs, and you can bring them home, and the boys can watch them turn into tadpoles, and then you can let them go. Yeah, it's always a fun. I've probably caught more frogs than most people in the world. other than folks living in like a rainforest. Okay. All right, Mr. Siddons.
Nothing. Just hanging around the house, getting stuff done, thinking about the spring, and thinking about how interesting how last year around this time we were shutting down. Dr. Dodd had to cancel his island sojourn.
Oh gosh, that was
right.
depressing.
I forgot about that.
It was such a bummer.
Yep.
I was bummed for you.
Yeah.
And then I got a big, 2 tons of mulch in my front driveway that took me a week to spread, and then we were locked down for a year.
I know.
Pretty wild to think about it.
Yep, 2 days away from the close of schools, March 13th, 2020, and
that's right.
The world changed. And
there's a light at the end of the tunnel, which is nice.
Yep, and the conference tournaments, which are just starting, right, Mr. Krabs, this week.
This weekend, yeah.
Yeah, WVU, Mr. Sids. I think you should be following them.
The Mountaineers.
They lost today. So.
Did they lose? The Terps had a big win over Michigan State.
Sorry, Huggins.
They're going to get crushed by Michigan, but that's what I'm excited for them. All right. As always, thanks for listening to Ed's Not Dead. Spread the word about the pod, and as always, send us feedback. We will read it on the show. We always appreciate you listening to the pod. And for Casey and Peter, thanks for listening to Ed's Not Dead. We're out. See you, boys.
See ya.
Bye.